Golden Years sequel is one of my favorite film microgenres. If not, sometimes simply because they can be a pleasure drenched in chocolate guilt, nostalgia manipulation, or margaritas. Here's a strange thing to say out loud. I'm a millennial. A 36-year-old millennial, because apparently we olds were in there too. It's kind of hard to talk about it, so I'm gonna go eat some avocado toast and just have a think. The late sequel, or the modern sequel to something made over 20 years ago, which, if you're playing at home now, qualifies the Rugrats movie for a 20-year sequel. Oh god, bury us all in the shallowest field. I've been thinking about this idea for years, basically since Tron Legacy came out. I remember walking out of the theater and being utterly bewildered by my emotional state. On paper, that movie rules and has one of the most banging soundtracks of all time, but it left me with an empty, frigid feeling that seemingly swelled over time. It was a feeling that was repeated walking out of Jurassic World, which was a dope film about Jimmy Buffett protecting his margaritas in the most easily avoidable of circumstances. But why did they both leave me with such feelings of emptiness? And then your brain goes, what did the films say? What did they make you feel? Honestly, mostly, hey, remember that? Stuff that doesn't attempt to say something new with a franchise we wanted to catch up with because we missed it. Entertainment evolves generationally. Trust me, us 80s and 90s kids know a thing or two about fruitless, hey, remember that our parents used to watch with us and be like, I used to watch this familiar brand I identify my childhood with. Starsky and Hutch, now, my generation is doing that same thing with our kids. Star Wars, Tron, Rocky, Alien, Star Trek, Top Gun. There was an X-Files movie in 2008, apparently. Scream, Clerks, Indiana Jones, Dumb and Dumber, Wall Street, Karate Kid, Mad Max, Twin Peaks. Hell, Jumanji originally came out in 1995. Rest in peace, us. The invention of the blockbuster created us, the hopelessly nostalgic because we grew up appreciating different media from a formative age than our parents did generation. Millennials, we love loving stuff. Sometimes we're bad at it though. But something recently did a box office flyby, and though it made a serviceable splash when it came out, I think it got missed by more than a few people. In this episode, I want to talk about something I feel was a modern classic that future generations will look back on fondly. I want to talk about Blade Runner 2049. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. Here's some science that will make infinite, immediate sense to you, but also make you uncomfortable. The brain experiences different types of nostalgia differently. We experience music nostalgically different than we experience passive visual entertainment like film and television. Here's the not fun part. Nostalgia is an addictive thing. Here's the even more not funner part. That's a plausible thing for rich film and television studios to realize, homogenize, formulate, and apply the minimal amount of effort to extract a highly profitable product from. Manipulating your nostalgia. Whatever you tethered your formative child brain to all the way through your teenage years, that is susceptible to manipulation through brain chemistry. Did you woo? Be honest. Did you woo? You can hack that. Needless to say, that doesn't mean every late sequel to an older film is a soulless nostalgia torpedo. Blade Runner 2049 to me feels like a thing that will never happen again. A confluence of events that will not be repeated for a hot minute, especially considering it cost $150 million to make and only made back $92 million domestically. So I doubt any studios are trying to recreate this particular tragedy at the moment. It's an almost 3-hour exploration of our nostalgia. It's poetic, rhythmic, meditative, jaw-dropping, beautiful, dynamic, and quite centrally questions, is our nostalgia real or just implanted memories for nefarious purposes? The movie poses the central question an audience will logically ask. Why did you make this? Art or money? Which is all well and good because they didn't make any money. Got 'em. Blade Runner was a Ridley Scott film from 1982. There are 7, count them 7 cuts of this film released to public audiences, which have different meanings, the most interesting of which being Ridley's original vision where a dream about a unicorn strongly implied that Deckard was a replicant. You know what? It doesn't matter. Philip K. Dick wrote the original story where that wasn't the case. Enter Harrison Ford, a fan of the original novel and sort of rightfully being upset by the idea of a film where humans enslave and abuse their synthetic creations, foregoing that important social commentary for what is essentially a Shyamalan twist. I see replicants. It doesn't work. This culminated in the studio, who was also gun-shy about the whole Deckard replicant storyline for completely different reasons, even forcing Harrison Ford to record a voiceover he very famously phoned in to be as terrible as possible so they wouldn't use it.
That was my profession. Ex-cop. Ex-Blade Runner. Ex-killer.
Spoiler, they used it. Yeah, the story around the original film is whoo! This film was a mess for a lot of its life, up to and including one of the lasting and ambiguous questions that kept us talking about it for decades. Argued and debated for 35 years, which also needed to be resolved to make a sequel this connected. And we'll talk about all that in a second. What the original film did unambiguously accomplish was the birth of cyberpunk cinema. Blade Runner is widely credited with creating an aesthetic that would give birth to a subgenre. It's a beautifully photographed mind explosion with styles for miles and dopeness to spare. The original film was shot by Jordan Cronenweth, a cinematographer who also shot Peggy Sue Got Married.
Yeah. And I'm not Jordan Cronenweth. I could not like Jordan, so I didn't even wanted to go there. I mean, I kind of like in a naturalistic way, in a much simpler way, and he's got his style was so much more classic and cuts and a wonderful. I couldn't do that.
God, Roger Deakins is cool. He shot the sequel, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and I'm not limiting that statement to cinema. An ever-evolving piece of literal art. The miniature work in this film is without a peer in decades. No one does this anymore, and they brought on Alex Funk as the director of miniature photography, whose credits doing the same job include Total Recall, all 3 Lord of the Rings films, which also included the special effects photography, Waterworld, Starship Troopers, The Abyss, and his job on this one was to oversee the shooting of the miniatures from Weta Workshop. You're not going to see something like this happen again for a hot second. This film goes out of its way to make stuff feel real and lived in and dark and hopeless, and an absolutely breathtaking display of craftsmanship, artistry, and care. It is literally constructed of amazing art. And that was before Roger Deakins went to work.
I mean, it's one of those sort of things, though, you can't say no to sort of the opportunity.
Sweet popsicle Christ, I can't believe this is a real movie. And I will watch this movie for the rest of my life.
But did you know?
Niander Wallace weaponizes sunlight against anyone who enters Wallace Corporation. A cinematographer's job is to use light to tell a story. 30 years on from Blade Runner, LA cannot see the sun anymore, but when you're inside his anxiety chamber, there's mimicked sunlight always moving, pulsating, distracting, and mimicking sunlight. People don't really have a great memory, and he's weaponizing that against the people that come into his building. Niander is, of course, blind, so it accomplishes a thing with photographing light that doubles down on the ruthlessness of his character. That's a story told through cinematography. Oh, and the whole film looks stunning. Denis and company are using every storytelling method they have available to tell stories to paint a picture of this harsh, uncaring future. Ask any artist friend you have, what does Blade Runner mean to you? It packs design for days, even if the people making it didn't totally agree on what it all meant, but I think it's one of the most substantially relevant pieces of cinematic art ever made. It influenced an entire generation to think about the dirt in the cracks of an unpristine future. There is no way to undersell how huge it is that a movie delivered on a visual bar that was unreachable by any film ever, and yet Roger Deakins hit that bar. So even if you think this movie is aimless simian philanderance, you can still watch one of the most beautiful films ever made. Which is all an appetizer, because we're going to attempt to talk about this massive narrative in a concise and helpful way, so... What's up? It's time for another movie explainer banger from your boy, the movie larynx. Like and subscribe. Okay, let's just stick to this format then. So this narrative is large, sprawling, often between what I've heard people call a movie where a lot of characters stare at things, which, sure. But it does matter what those characters are staring at. Here are some very broad strokes. Deckard and Rachel, sometime after the first film, have a child, and Deckard does everything in his power to hide the identity of said child from the world. A child born with some pretty significant defects. Enter Kay, on a routine mission to retire a rogue replicant who has intense and powerful knowledge of the situation, finds evidence that his childhood memories might not be implanted and could in fact be real. He finds what's left of Rachel under a tree, who could be his mother.
Interlinked.
That memory is confirmed not once, but twice. But what he doesn't know is the first time it was confirmed was by the person who lived it. Hence, her being overwhelmed by it. Kay isn't the special. And when he finds that out, he has an understandably difficult decision to make. He could very easily not do the right thing, but he does. Not once, but twice. And it kills him.
What's it like to hold your child in your arms, interlinked?
Deckard is the one who got the happy ending, not the protagonist.
Do you feel that there's a part of you that's missing? Interlinked.
This movie does a lot of really interesting things. Like, here's a question. Do you know which characters in this film are replicants? Or bioengineered humans? Their preferred label. They call themselves humans. I ask myself that same question. Kay is, Love is, Sapper is, Stelline is something new. Deckard reasonably isn't, cause aging, but the film spends much of its 163-minute runtime purposely not answering that question and drawing much of a distinction between machine and human. That ambiguity is on purpose. You could argue the point of the film was not answering that question, and I'll get to why in a moment. In this film, an artificial intelligence and a bioengineered human have a meaningful relationship with obstacles they find creative solutions for. They bleed, they die, they have diseases that prevent them from touching the outside world, people treat them badly, and both humans and replicants alike will connive and manipulate them into damaging themselves to push a large corporate agenda. This is late stage capitalism. The distinction between life forms in this reality is no longer relevant, which itself is commentary on the black and white world of the first film that turned quite muddy from the whole Tears and Rain speech where Roy Batty, who Deckard was sent to retire, saves Deckard's life unambiguously, and Batty uses his dying moments to deliver a wonderful little speech about C-beams glittering near the Tannhauser Gate, and our experience and memories washing away like they were nothing. Who will remember us? Natural human or not? We are all born in some way through artificial means or not. We all die in some way through artificial means or not.
Within cells interlinked.
This film turns that water into mud. There is no distinction. Blade Runner, a term unambiguously synonymous with villain. Odd that. Two films who use implanted memories of horses or horse-adjacent unicorns to discuss the nature and value of manufactured life. You create something, it doesn't necessarily give you the right to destroy it. puts a belief in God in a very interesting context. It's a moral melange.
We're all just looking out for something real.
Kay is a lonely man. He lives a quiet life with an AI named Joy who loves him. And he loves her. By the end of the film, we love her too. And Joy is killed by a psychopath. So is Kay. Same psychopath, in fact. Kay and Joy, two free-thinking individuals, were brought into this world by whatever means they were because it's none of our business. And they die in the service of sentient life form equality because what's a human? Free will, got that. Fears, love, an ability to sacrifice oneself to make an ugly world a little less ugly, even when you find out you aren't special? Got that too. Kay reunites Deckard with his daughter, bringing us fully back to the central question you've been waiting for me to talk about this entire time. Is Deckard a replicant? Doesn't matter. Being a replicant is not mutually exclusive from being a human. He's a dad. Doesn't matter. When it comes down to it, what a hell of a statement for a sequel 35 years in the making to itself make. Stop asking. This film made the first film better, and it was already really, really good. What an incredible achievement. It made sense of an unsure question and washed it all away. Like tears in rain. Oh, okay, I'm calm. Are you calm? I'm calm. I'm not calm. So here's what happened. You'll see these names look different. There's a reason for that. Hello, Sean Steed and Zach Marsh and Brett Brizzy. Some of these will look like they belong in the same places as they used to. A lot of the other names will just seem like an alphabetical list. We had to reorder things a little bit because Patreon was helping. I'm helping. They weren't. So, up until now, you could download a list of all your patrons, and it was really easy to grab all of the King Pretzel tiers to throw them up on screen, like Justin Holt, my boy, Kelly Naylor, my gender-inspecific friend. It's all good in the neighborhood. So here's what happened. Patreon just now gives you a list of literally everyone connected to your Patreon in an alphabetical list, regardless of tier, regardless of whether or not they're active anymore. This literally goes back all the way to the beginning to people that have been declined or left for whatever reason. And it also gives you a list of people that just follow your Patreon. They'd never given you any money at all. So that was not my favorite thing. Unlike Brady Altop, who is my favorite thing. Anyway, big thanks to Terry Eakin for helping me make sense of it. The list is sorted by basically how anyone who's giving more money than the asking price on the King Pretzel tier is listed first, and so on, and how long you've been a patron. We did our best, but from there it's listed alphabetically. So Walrus and Tim Gordon are no longer at the bottom, and that breaks my heart because it's gonna look weird for a while, I guess. Lil V, Bruce Fiend, Sandy Lester, Iris Fox, Jeff Good, Brian Graham, Christopher Harris, Ducky, Tim Shannon, Will Shenmeyer, Peter. Hello, Peter. It's throwing me off, all the names being different. So this was a really fun episode to do. Obviously, I love Blade Runner. Obviously, I was carrying some of my own problems with the first film, mostly kind of how it never had a cohesive message because a lot of the artists were saying different things, and I feel like the new movie really zeroed in on something very specific, so that now both movies are perfect in my mind. Go watch Deep Dive. Yeah, I told you to. Go do it. It's a great show, and I love the people on it, and I love Tommy W. Farley, the new bottom of the list, Dallas Lasley, Brian Kalachi, or Kalasi, I'm not sure. Wow, I ran out of time. I was explaining the Patreon problem. Oh well, bye!